Bienvenidos a todos. Welcome, everyone. Good evening for those of you on the East Coast. Good late afternoon for those of you on the West Coast. So happy to see everyone here with us for a very special evening program for this week in conversation through our Sephardic Industry Leaders series with the former president of Starbucks, Howard Behar. We're so happy to have him here with us tonight. Just so you all know, this program is through our Sephardic Jewish Brothers of America, Latte Sephardic de America, the national umbrella organization for the Sephardic communities in the United States. And it's through our new Sephardic Digital Academy, a wonderful new program we launched near the beginning of the pandemic to really connect our communities digitally through so much amazing learning, Torah, Ladino language and culture classes, Sephardic cooking classes, of course, you can never get Sephardic cooking, and so much more. If you're interested in learning about our other programs as well, make sure to go and check out our website at sephardicbrotherhood.com/Sephardic Digital Academy. With that, I want to say a few words about our speaker this evening, Mr. Howard Behar. For 21 years, Howard led Starbucks domestic business as president of North America, and he became a founding president of Starbucks International, opening the very first store outside of North America in Japan. During his tenure, he participated in the growth of the company from only 28 stores to over 15,000 stores, spanning 5 continents. He served on the Starbucks board of directors for over 12 years before retiring. Howard now serves on the boards of several for-profit and non-for-profit organizations, including Education Element, ID Tech, the School of Leadership Studies at Gonzaga University. He is on the advisory boards of Anthos Capital, the University of Washington Foundation, and a trustee for the Sherry and Les Diller Family Foundation. He's also a committed writer. He's written a number of publications, including his first book, It's Not About the Coffee, Lessons on Leadership from a Life at Starbucks. Without further ado, I'll invite Howard. Just need you to unmute and we'll begin the conversation.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I see some faces that I know, like Betty Goodman and Larry Almo and a few others. Good to see them.
Great. We're going to jump in. So, folks, what we're going to do, first half, I have some prepared questions for Howard. And then the second half, we're going to open up to Q&A from the audience. If you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to write them into the chat, and we'll make sure to ask them as we get to the second point in the conversation. So Howard, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal Sephardic background growing up in Seattle and your heritage?
Well, first of all, you have to know I'm a half-breed, half Ashkenazi, half Sephardic. My father was from Bulgaria, born in a little town called Steinamaka, which was on the Greek-Bulgarian border. And he came to the United States actually in 1911 as a 15-year-old, you know, the typical story, but he left all his family except for a brother that was here. Never saw his parents again, never saw any of his family again. And my mother came from Latvia. She came in 1917 as a 9-year-old, and they met in Seattle. And against all the rules of Jews at that time, they found each other and they married each other. And so I got the best of both worlds. I got gefilte fish and I got burekas and balemas. So I grew up, my dad worked in the Pike Place Market, which interestingly enough, there were a lot of Sephardics in the Pike Place Market. You know, there were fish markets or fishmongers, there were Sephardic, there were, the vegetable and fruit stands. And my dad got a job there. I was 15 and pushed a cart and saved his pennies, nickels, and dimes and opened a small mom and pop grocery store in the north end of Seattle in about 1924. And so, I was raised kind of on both sides of the aisle, so to speak. You know, my dad there were no Sephardic restaurants. The closest thing was there was an Armenian restaurant in the Pike Place Market. So that's where my dad would go to get his yogurt and, when he wanted lamb and things like that. That was the closest thing that he could come to Sephardic food. And so we would go there at least once a month, and he would take me with him. And it was just a little tiny hole in the wall. And so that was my introduction to, being a Sephardic. And then, but then I got, my Sephardic side got really involved in my first marriage. My first wife was from a Sephardic family. And that's when we were married in a Sephardic synagogue. We were married at the Sephardic Bicker Holem in Seattle. And I got more involved and more understanding. Until that, it was only about the food, the differences in the food. But so, that's kind of my Sephardic background. And I've gotten more involved, and because I've had so many Sephardic friends in Seattle, and I connected. I connected more with the Sephardic friends than I connected with the Ashkenazi friends, simply because it was soulful. And I got a chance to go to Bulgaria and find my grandparents' grave, and the only remaining synagogue in Bulgaria, it's in Sofia, and they had consolidated all the birth and death records for all the synagogues. And we were able to go into those records, and I had somebody that helped me, my cousin who lives in Israel and was from Bulgaria. And we found my grandfather's grave, and we went and I put a new headstone up, and it was very meaningful experience for me. So, and then my father's family all immigrated to Israel after the war, the ones that survived. His parents didn't survive, but his brothers and sisters did. And so over a period of time, we started to make connections. We didn't know them. And my wife went to Beersheba Hospital or to a hospital in Beersheba, Israel. And she met all my relatives and did a family tree. And that really upped my Sephardic education a lot, because they were all Sephardic. And so, it's been a great experience to find my roots, to tell you the truth. Very rewarding.
That's wonderful. I'm curious if, you have a very interesting background coming from both Bulgaria and being Sephardic, but also the fact that you've played such a prominent role in one of America's really well-established companies. Do you think that your background has influenced your kind of business interests, or coffee in particular?
I think my Jewish background has influenced how I've led, without a question. It's influenced my values, what I believe in life, and how I've tried to live out those beliefs. And I'm not the only one. A guy named Richard Galante, who is a CFO of Costco, is there, and Joel Ben-Alil, who is at Costco also, two Sephardics that I'm close to. So Seattle's a Sephardic town, as most of you know. They came early and they stayed. I have a picture of my father down in the oldest part of Seattle, sitting around with 8 people, all smoking out of the pipe. I don't know if it was just tobacco in there. I assume maybe it probably was something else, but who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, I could always see them with the little mustaches and the little fez,
Yeah.
like they used to wear, I'm sure.
Right.
So I wanted to touch base first about how you first kind of got involved in business, in the business world. Kind of what was your undergraduate and graduate degrees, and kind of what led you into business in general?
Oh, see, I don't have a degree. There's no undergraduate and no graduate degree. I barely got out of high school, and I had 2 years of community college, and my best subject when I got there was beer, and by the time I left, it was single malt scotches. So I was good at those two things. But so my education basically has been working. My dad had that small mom and pop grocery store, and I was around him all the time. He was significantly older when I was born. He was 50, and so he would take me to the store all the time. When you're exposed like that, by osmosis, you learn things. And then he taught me about people. I remember when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my dad asked me to go get some strawberries out of the back of the store for a couple of customers right in the front. And I went and got the 2 baskets of strawberries, and my dad put them in the customer's bag. Well, I was used to my dad. In those days, there was a hand crank cash register, believe it or not. And there was like 10 keys across and 10 keys down. And he'd push the buttons and then pull the crank, and that would add it up on a little piece of white paper, tape that came out. And so he put those baskets of strawberries in the person's bag, and I know people left, and I noticed that he hadn't rung up the strawberries. And I said, "Dad, you forgot to ring up the strawberries," and he just looked at me, and and he said, "Howard, not everything we do in life are we supposed to get paid for. These people are not just our customers, they're our neighbors and our friends. And I happen to know that they like fresh fruit. And I also happen to know they're struggling right now. And so it's just my way of helping them out." I didn't realize that lesson at that time, but it's a Jewish lesson, right? You give, right? And you contribute and you help other people. And I didn't realize it at that time, but as I got older, I remembered that incident, and it really formed the nucleus of who I have tried to be in my business life. And So I didn't have a degree. Probably, as I look back at my life, it would probably have been one thing that I should have done. And I just wasn't a great student and I was not that disciplined, but I love to learn being part of something. And my mother's family, everybody came. There were 11 children in her family. They all got to Seattle and almost all of them were in some kind of retail business. Jewelry business. One was a bagel maker. One was a tailor. One was a pawn shop owner. One was in the music business, music instruments. And so they were all in downtown Seattle. I was visiting them all the time. And so I got to learn what retail was like. And it just struck a chord with me because it was people centric. And I was that's who I was. I was the third born by significantly. My sister was 13 years older. She just passed away a couple of weeks ago, and my brother was 10 years older than me. But, I got the opportunity to see firsthand what retail was like. And I fell in love with retail. And I was really raised like an only child. My parents took me wherever they went. And it was always to, family houses for dinner on Saturday night or Friday night for the Sabbath. And so, I was treated like an adult and I got to listen to their business conversations. And that formed the nucleus of what I became interested in. And that's how I got into retail. And I've been in consumer products my whole life.
Let's talk about how you jumped into Starbucks, because it seems like this is a very niche area within retail and one that you yourself had a major hand in developing, because frankly, 30, 40 years ago, coffee was not nearly as big as what it is today in terms of retail sales.
Well, I had been running a land development company that basically was like a timeshare for RV owners. And it was the first time I ever got opportunity to be president of a company. The company was in trouble and I put my hand up and said, give me a shot. And they gave me a shot and I learned, that's where I got my MBA, because the company was in so much trouble that we were in the workout group of the Bank of Boston, where they're calling you every day about what's the cash flow like, and they just stripping your bank accounts all the time, And so I learned a lot in those times. It was painful, but I learned valuable lessons, and during that time. And so eventually we got the company sold, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I said, no more corporations. I'm going to go to my roots. I'm going to find a small business to buy. And so I started looking around to find small business to buy. And I looked at everything. And I even got interested in a tea company that had a store in the Pike Place Market. It was called Market Spice Tea. I tried to buy it, and the guy that owned it wouldn't sell it. And I even tried to do a partnership, but he wasn't interested. So I walked away from that. And finally, I found a retail business to buy. It was, somebody will remember, there was a company called Hickory Farms. They basically sold cheeses and salamis and in malls, and they were primarily a Christmas or holiday oriented business. And I had friends that were in the furniture business, and they were older. They didn't have any kids to leave the business to, and they wanted to get out. And so they were willing to sell it to me for 1 times cash flow, which is a great deal. If you're in the business world, you'll know that. So I didn't have any money. I had a little bit of money, but I had to go to my brother-in-law who had the money in the family, and his name is Ken Schoenfeld. And I went to him and I said, Kenny, I'd like to buy this business, and it's a franchise. And he said, I don't know anything about franchising. Let's go, but I'll loan you the money if it turns out to be good. And so he said, but there's somebody I know that knows a lot about franchising. So he said, and I'd like to go meet with him. There's a guy named Jack Rogers. He happened to be the first investor that Howard Schultz got when he was buying Starbucks from the founders. And so Kenny says, we're going to meet at the Starbucks building. Now, I had met with Howard a year before that. He was looking for a VP of operations. And he had this long list of criteria that he wanted in a person. First thing, college degree. I didn't have that. Second thing, food service experience. Finally, we got down to number 10. Can I breathe? Yes, I qualified for that. But I didn't fit anything that he wanted. And the truth of the matter is, I didn't want to go to work for somebody else again. I wanted to have my own business. So we went and met with Jack Rogers in the Starbucks headquarters. And I'm pitching my heart out to Jack of why I should buy this business and why Kenny should loan me the money. And Jack just looked at me and said, what do you want to do something like that for? We need a guy like you right here at Starbucks. You could have heard my brother-in-law's sigh of relief probably all the way down to California from Seattle. If he didn't have to loan me any money, my sister'd be happy and everything would be right with the world. and I said to Jack, I said, I've been through the journey with Howard before and we didn't fit. And he said, well, things haven't changed. And let me tell you something, Howard, this is going to be a great business. I want you to talk to Howard again. So I went and met with Howard again, and he still hadn't filled that position. And he said, well, I'd like to consider you joining. And I said, Howard, before you decide to invite me to join, and before I agree to join, can I work in the company for a week? Work for free. Okay, don't pay me anything. I want to work in the stores for 3 days, in the trucks for a couple of days, and the manufacturing distribution center for a couple of days. And I did that. I packed Costco beans. This was before anything was automated. 5-pound bags or 2.5 bags, fill them by hand, put the piece of tape on them, put the label on them. I did that for 2 solid days. I was so tired by the time I got home at night, on my feet all day long. And after that first week, I just connected. I connected with the people that I was working with, and I figured out that, that this was early on. I sensed it wasn't about coffee, that it was about people. And so Howard extended an invitation for me to join, and so my driving force inside of Starbucks was to convince them we weren't in the coffee business serving people, but we were in the people business serving coffee. And that was probably my primary contribution to Starbucks. The idea that it was about people. People were going to make us successful, not the coffee. So that's how I got there. I turned right instead of turning left. And if not for Jack Rogers, I wouldn't have been there. I would have had a salami shop that probably would have gone out of business, because I don't even think they're still in business anymore. So sometimes you get lucky. I love that definition of luck, is where opportunity meets preparation. And the opportunity came, and it came twice, right? How do you figure that out? It came twice. And the second time it stuck, with me and with Howard. And I was prepared. I had lots of experience by that time. I understood how to make a retail store work. So that's how I got there.
So let's talk about, that's a great just narration. It's a wonderful story in terms of just the happenstance, and just you got lucky in some ways,
you don't
but
know
also
in life.
bringing your professional experience.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm curious, can you speak maybe a little bit about your time at Starbucks, and what motivated you to really have the idea, or at least the wherewithal, to scale so large? I mean, nobody had done that up until that point. Nobody had scaled consumer business like that, in coffee, no less, before. How did you have the wherewithal, or just the drive and just the strength to move forward in such a kind of difficult position?
Well, the truth of the matter is Howard Schultz had that drive. There was a third leg to the stool. They called us H2O. It was Howard Schultz, Howard Behar, and Orrin Smith. So 2 H's and an O, right? And so Orrin and I were more conservative. Orrin was particularly more conservative. He came out of the finance business. We used to call him the tortoise, because he was slow and methodical going to his target. I was more emotional in that sense than, I was more like Howard in that sense. But Howard had the dream. Howard had come from Brooklyn, from New York, and he was raised a very poor family, and he had to drive. He wanted to be successful, probably more than anybody I've ever known. I did not have that. Money didn't mean anything to me. It was, I just wanted to like what I did. That was why I was trying to find my own business. And so, but what I had were the people skills that Howard didn't have. And so that's what really drove the business. I mean, but it was Howard's vision. Howard said early on, he said, someday we're going to have 100 stores in Manhattan. I said, Howard, what are you smoking? Right? I never had any. Now I think there's like 300 or 400 stores in Manhattan, who knows? But he had that vision. Orrin and I caught it, right? We caught the fever. And I'll tell you where it happened to me first, when I first understood how big the opportunity was. We had some stores in Vancouver, British Columbia, maybe 5 or 6 stores. And one of those stores was our best store up there. And it was on a great corner called Robson and Thurlow. And Robson and Thurlow was a heavy traffic retail corner. And we were in a building that had a demolition clause. And we couldn't afford to be off that corner, because that store was doing twice the volume of any of our other stores, highly profitable. And so I said to our real estate person, I said, see if you can get that site across the kitty corner from this store, right? And it was in a heritage building, and it takes forever to get that. And she said, well, what are you going to do if I get it? What are you going to do with the other store? I said, I don't know. We can probably maybe always sublease it, but I can't take the chance of losing a store in this corner. I thought it'd take her a year or two to get that store, and heritage buildings are tough to get and get permitted, because you can't change anything on the outside. You can't do anything. So 6 months later, she comes back. She says, I've got it. And now I started to sweat, right? I said, uh-oh, what do I do? And I just said, we're taking it. So let's get the lease signed. We're going to take it. And so we took that store and we opened that second store, kitty corner, from the first store. And we doubled the volume on that corner. Those two stores, they were doing at that time, the average store was doing about 600,000. The first store was doing $1 million. The second store immediately ramped up to $1 million. So all of a sudden we went from doing $1 million on the corner to $2 million. And I looked at that and I said, oh my God. Not only that, there were two different customers. One we called the bikers and one we called the suits. And that's how different the two customers were across the street from each other. It was an amazing thing to watch. And that gave me confidence to do more. And so I was in charge of real estate at that time, and working with real estate from an operations point of view. And I just said, we can put more stores in. And so we started doubling up. We started putting stores close to each other, block away, 2 blocks away, 6 blocks away. And they all worked. And yeah, we had some drop. And that's when I knew how big it was. And once we got that sense, and Orrin got it, and Howard believed it all the time. He didn't know, but he believed, and that's what did it. And that really made Starbucks what it was. We could open stores so close together because the coffee business was different than any other kind of business. We just didn't understand it at that time. And we knew that speed was going to be of the essence, because it's easy to open up a coffee store. And there were 21 other competitors at the time when we really got going, which was in 1989. Most of them had more stores than we did. But we were the one that came through. And it was primarily because of Howard's aggressiveness, Orrin's skill in getting the business financed, and my skill in attracting people to the organization and building a team. And the three of us, we were a team. We always knew where each other was on the basketball court. We would argue like hell. I mean, Howard and I got in blowouts over things, but we held together, and that's what made it work. So that's when I first learned, and that's what really got it going. And then we just started opening. We got money, we raised money, and I think we only had to go to market twice, and then we went public. And we didn't have to borrow any money after that. We borrowed money once because the banker said we have to have some debt on our balance sheet. We didn't really need it. After about a year, we got rid of it, and we didn't want to owe money to anybody, and that's what made it work. And it was a coffee, it's coffee. I mean, that's where coffee came to play. If you drink coffee, you drink it every day. And the repeat business was amazing. Average customer, what we called heavy users, would come in 18 times a month. I mean, it was unheard of.
Incredible. I'm curious. I'm getting a bunch of questions in the chat already, which is wonderful. I'm curious. You mentioned some of these very difficult conversations. Kind of what were kind of some of the most, you think, tenuous conversations? What were some of the hardest things you really had to fight it out with? And how did you resolve them? I mean, this can also speak to anyone really in the business world. How do you resolve these kind of really difficult disputes with partners?
Well, there are different ones. Some of them, one I had right out of the gate. I had been there about a month, and I was out visiting a store in eastern side of, or in Bellevue, Washington, east side. Actually, it was in Redmond. And I walk into the store and I meet the store. I'd never met the store manager. I introduced myself and was talking, and I noticed there's somebody behind the counter, and they had a tape measure out. And I'm a curious guy, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, we're measuring for hot soup, to put hot soup." I said, "You're what?" "Measuring for hot soup." I mean, I got back to the office and I went into Howard's office. I said, "What are you thinking? Why you want to put hot soup in the stores?" "Well, trying to increase the business." I said, "Howard, we can't handle," right? At that time, we were making handmade sandwiches. I mean, I looked at that and I said, the people that want coffee can't get through the line. And so I said, "We don't need soup right now. Maybe it'll come in the future." But my advice is to get rid of it. We had an argument about it, but he agreed. Finally, we did. And I got rid of the sandwiches as well, which he didn't like. And then the second thing, big thing, this was a huge thing. I got into a store and somebody in line ahead of me, a customer in line ahead of me, said, they ordered a skinny latte. I had no idea what a skinny latte was. So after the customer left, I said to the barista, what's a skinny latte? Well, they were trying to get a latte made with non-fat milk. We don't have non-fat milk. And I said, so what do you do? Well, we have 2%. So I sell them 2%. And it works sometimes, sometimes it doesn't. So I came back and I said to him, do you think we could do all right if we had non-fat milk? And this store manager there said yes. So I came back to the office and I went to Howard and I said, I want to put non-fat milk in the stores. You'd have thought I put an atomic bomb down right in the middle of the table. He said, you want a what? We will not have non-fat milk in our stores. It'll denigrate the coffee. And I looked at him, I said, wait a minute. The customer determines how they want their coffee, not us, right? And actually there was a guy that was in the coffee department that quit over that, me putting in non-fat milk. So I didn't put it in because right away. So what I did was we used to have these meetings called open forums. And I set it up so somebody would ask the question, why can't we have non-fat milk? It was one of the store managers that had guts, you know? And I said, I don't know. How many would like non-fat milk? And about 8 store managers raised their hand out of about the 30 that we had. And I said, okay, let's try it. You 8 can have it. The rest of you don't have to have it. Well, you know what happened. In about 6 months, it represented about half of our business. And now everybody wanted it, you know? And we had a bunch of, we had product arguments. Frappuccino was a huge blowout argument. He didn't want Frappuccino. I don't think he still likes it. Semi-automated espresso machines. I snuck the first ones into Tokyo, didn't tell anybody. And, you know, because what I believed is that you're there to serve the customer. You're not there to live to some thing that you believe in that doesn't have, it isn't true. You know, it's just what you happen to believe. And so those are the kind of things that we'd argue. But the truth of the matter is, you know, we agreed on most things and I pushed, you know, and Howard was a great guy. You know, Howard would, you know, he let me run. And if I really believed in something, he didn't get in my way. And, you know, if I screwed up, I was the first one to come tell him, hey, I blew this. And I blew a couple of big things, you know, out of the gate. But he was willing to put up with my gruff and I was willing to put up with him. But I think it was probably because Howard, where he was raised, you know, Canarsie was not a soft and gentle place, you know, and so he was used to people fighting back a little bit. I think he respected that in me and I respected who he was. And so, you know, we survived a long time together. People thought we'd kill each other. And probably if it had just been the two of us with that Oren, we would have.
Oh, it's amazing. We're going to open up for questions now. If anybody has any questions in the chat, I want to ask one last question for me, at least, to jump out a little bit. I'm curious, when you were growing up as a kid, because you kind of grew up in this very tight-knit community, this very tight-knit Sephardic community, what were some of the Sephardic traditions and Ladino words and phrases you might have grown up remembering? I'm always curious of these kinds of things, if you remember any.
I really didn't. You know, interestingly enough, a lot of my friends were Sephardic, and because I had a girlfriend that lived out by the Sephardic synagogues, and so I met all these Sephardic guys. And my very first date was a guy named Harry Caraco, and he's Sephardic, and we're still friends today. As a matter of fact, we were making bulemas the other day together, you know, and I'm still close to him. But so I didn't have that. I really did not. I regret it because I think it would have deepened me and it would have helped me be a different person. But you know, it's part of life. You know, it's the experiences I had. I think I was beneficial to have both sides, to tell you the truth. It gave me a much broader understanding of Judaism and what it meant and the differences. And so one of my most favorite, I've been to Israel many times. And one of my most favorite memories of going into a Sephardic synagogue with a friend that was there, Sephardic Orthodox synagogue, and the whole service was in chanting and rhythmic chanting. It was the most amazing experience I think I've ever had. It was just mystical, you know, never been anything like it since.
Amazing. I have to take this as a shameless plug for our new Sephardic Ladino 101 class. For those of you who haven't checked it out, every Wednesday at noon Eastern with the amazing Karen Chacon. It's a beginner's Ladino class. I encourage you all to check out on our website. You as well.
I should do that. Well, I wanted to go to the cooking classes. I'm really interested in that.
You got to join. We got more in 2 weeks, so you got to join for sure.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of questions here in the chat. A very common one we're getting here is what your favorite Starbucks store and coffee drink is. I think that's a very big question for that.
I love all the stores because I love all the people. I mean, the one that was probably, it was the first international store that we had, which was in Tokyo. And I had the opportunity to be the first president of Starbucks International. I was the founding president of Starbucks International. And we opened a store in Shibuya, oh God, I forget the name of the shopping district now, but and behind Mitsukoshi, department store. And that was our very first store in Japan. And I remember the morning that it opened. I was there at 7 o'clock because in the States at 7 o'clock, our stores are busy. I get there at 7 o'clock, not a customer. Now, Howard Schultz is sitting right next to me, and I had made this decision to go to Japan first. 8 o'clock comes, not a customer. 9 o'clock comes, not a customer. Finally, 10 o'clock, two people show up. Two guys show up, and they went into the store, and I rushed in right after them and shook their hands and said, thank you very much. They happened to be two guys from Seattle. So that's how it started. By that evening, there was a line around the block. And they didn't close. They were supposed to close that store at 10. It stayed open to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's how it all started. And the rest is history in Starbucks International.
That's incredible.
So my drink is, I drink every morning, I drink a triple tall Americano, 3 shots of espresso and about 8 to 10 ounces of hot water. And I have 2 of those. And by that time, I'm invisible.
I was going to say, you must become an addict at some point.
Yeah, I love coffee. I loved coffee before I went to Starbucks.
Yeah, I was also going to ask, as a follow-up, was it a bit, did you have to take a crash course at some point in kind of the nuances of the coffee industry, of where the beans and the roasts come from? Is there kind of did you just build that up over time?
No, I mean, I was working in the stores, and there was a guy there named Dave Olson who was the head of coffee, and he became my best friend. And so I learned a lot about coffee from him, but I could never match his. This guy if he took a sip of coffee, he could tell you where it was from, and the coffee's grown all over the world. But I learned a lot from him, and you absorb it after a while. And then we developed classes for people to educate people on coffee, and I took all those classes, and you learn about it, and then you're around it. You get it by osmosis, which was my best way of learning anyway.
Well, that's great. A more industry-related question. It's very relevant now with the pandemic and the development of the internet economy. Where do you see the future of retail? Where is it going, especially in the 21st century, with competition from companies like Amazon and Costco?
I think it's going to get more and more difficult. There are going to be survivors in retail. They're going to be specialists, or they're going to be like Costco. But there isn't even that much room. And when you look, Costco is the lead player in the warehouse business. I mean, Amazon and Walmart, who is entering more and more, and even Costco who's online now. I mean, I just don't see how retail survives in the way that we're used to it. It's just too easy for people. And I know my own habits, and I'm concerned about it. I'm concerned about what technology has done. It basically is making monster companies, globally monster companies. And as they mature, they're going to get less responsive to their customers. I guarantee it. Right? Their prices will increase, their margins will increase, have to increase. And I worry about that. And I think the other thing that I worry about too, retail is a creative business. The best merchants that I have ever known see around corners, right? They don't wait for the customer to tell them what they want. They see things that other people don't see. Steve Jobs was that in the technology business. In the furniture business, it was a guy named Howard Jackower, who long since passed away. He could see around corners. He could sense where the marketplace was going before anybody else. I don't see Amazon seeing around corners. I think Amazon is so data driven. They won't stay with anything too long if it's not selling, but sometimes you got to stay with things. I worry about the soul of the retail business, and you see what they've done to Whole Foods. I mean, they've decimated Whole Foods. I used to love to go to Whole Foods and to buy specialty items that you couldn't get anyplace else. Now they're just like everybody else. only with a Whole Foods label on it. And I worry about that, but I don't know. I don't think we're going to stop it. So, if you're going to be in retail today, you better be really good at a niche, and you better be as much in the entertainment business as you are in the retail business.
Yeah, and just to follow up to that, do you have any advice to kind of some young entrepreneurs who are looking to open that brick and mortar store? Is it still possible? What do they have to think about that's different from when you were in your
I think
time?
you have to see it as in combination of online and retail. I don't think you can just be retail and not be online. Maybe if you're a real one single or two stores, little niche stores, where you have a real specialty business in a city that's big enough to support you, restaurant businesses like that, but it's a tough business to survive in too, because there's so many competitors. But I think that if you're going to be in retail, bricks and mortar, you're going to have to be online too. And I think you got to be equally as good at both.
What do you think with the issue of corporate responsibility vis-a-vis the company to its employees? We've seen a lot of discussion about this, especially now in the pandemic, where some major companies are making a lot of money, and some employees are not making an increase in the proportion, especially at times when they need it. What are your thoughts on this?
We can't continue on this journey. It is not going to work. Okay, you cannot have a huge group of people that can hardly survive. It just can't. That will not work. It's like minimum wage. National minimum wage is $7 and something. Who's kidding who here? In the state of Washington now, or in Seattle, we have it was started at 15 when they raised it. Now it's close to 17. But we're going to have to continue to increase wages. Starbucks just gave a 10% increase across the board, through the whole country. And they're working their way towards $15 around the whole country, whether the federal government does it or not, because it's the right thing to do. Look, we have to all get in this together. And it can't be a few rich people and the rest of people have nothing. That's not how the country was built, and the country will not last. I don't know when that will break down, but it will break down. And it's not about socialism versus capitalism. That's a false comparison or false dichotomy, right? That's, you get that, well, we don't want to be socialist. Well, yeah, we're already socialist. What everybody thinks that Medicare and Social Security is. What are the farmers taking in the Midwest when they get help from the federal government to survive? That's socialism. Who's kidding who here? The goal is to keep our creativity, keep our energy, move forward, pay our people well. Look at Costco. There's Costco and Sam's Club. Okay, Walmart operated on pay people as least as you can pay them, right? And that's the way they operated Sam's Club. On the other hand, Costco operated, how much can we give our people and still make it work? And I remember Jim Sinegal, who was one of the founders with Jeff Brotman of Costco, said, when somebody said, well, why do you have to pay so much? And why do you have to give everybody health care? And he just looked back at him. He says, if you don't like our stock, don't buy it. And that's my attitude about it. And we pretty much operated that way at Starbucks. Everybody got health care out of the gate. The CEO, Howard Schultz, had the same health care benefits as the barista had. And part-time workers got health care and full-time workers got health care. Everybody got equity in the company, And so, it's, if we want to have a country that works, then we're going to have to go down that path. And that's what will make it work. Understanding that everybody's got to be paid. And, within reasons of the economics of the business, but sometimes we get too caught up in that too.
We're getting a lot of good questions. Thank you all so much for your questions. One question here is interesting. Who is Starbucks' largest competitor? And how do you maintain your unique kind of branding and identity separate from your competitor?
Well, I think the key to Starbucks has been the people. It's always been the people. When you walk into a Starbucks store, if you've been a customer for a long period of time, if it's running well, they should either know your name or know your drink, and at least recognize you. And it should be a personal experience, a human experience, not you got $1 pasted to your forehead, and if I just say the right thing, I'll get that $1. It's got to be something that's real, that's authentic. So I think that's one big thing. Now, we don't own that. Anybody could do it, but it takes a lot of discipline to do it. You got to be, we were 100% focused on it, and we still failed a lot of times. The other thing is, I think that there's lots of coffee companies now. There's hundreds of them. And if you live in Seattle area, you know there's a zillion little coffee companies, and they're all doing their own thing. And a lot of them now are going up above us in price. I mean, you can go to a coffee store in San Francisco now, pay $8 for a cup of drip coffee. People used to think we were expensive, but they're getting their business because people like what they do. That's good. And I think we have to, Starbucks, I'll tell you what will kill Starbucks is if they ever move away from their people-centric focus and they ever get too slick. I was always worried about getting too slick. I think Starbucks has to have a little texture to it, meaning we're not going to be perfect, and we have to always be experimenting and failing and trying things, and that will keep us going. And I think that's the great strength of Amazon. They're not afraid to fail, and they're always trying new things. So I think Starbucks continues to need to do that. Our largest competitor, it'd probably be, if you say coffee and just say coffee only, it'd be McDonald's. But if you were saying the coffee, because they sell tons of coffee, if you would say number of stores, it's probably Dunkin' Donuts, but we're very different than they are. They're a franchise organization. Not that franchising is bad. It's just a different deal, different deal. And so they're probably the second largest. I don't know how many stores they have now. There's nobody internationally that outside of McDonald's is as big as we are.
An interesting question here. Why do you feel that Starbucks didn't make it in Israel, or at least didn't have a strong showing like in other countries?
We were dumb. We were absolutely dumb. We went in thinking we knew all the answers. And Israel, if you know Israelis, they're tough customers. There was already a couple of coffee operations there. I can't remember the names of them now, but one was with a bakery backup. In Israel, you needed to have food with coffee. It had to be coffee. Actually, I would say it had to be food and coffee. And they may have sold more coffee than they sold food, but it had to be that much. We didn't go in with that. And we went and doing what we knew how to do, which is probably the right thing to do. And then we had a bad partner. We had a really bad partner. And we own that. We made a mistake. And that cost us 3 or 4 years. And then that partner went out and we ended up with a second bad partner. And so by the time it was all said and done, it was over. The game was over, and we just couldn't, we couldn't get penetration. The same thing kind of happened to us in Australia, only I think they're coming back slowly. You're not going to be a success everywhere. You're going to blow it some places, and we did. And so that's the way it goes sometimes. Starbucks is now back in there because we have a joint, or a Nestle basically bought our wholesale business. And now Nestle's in there with Starbucks branded product. And maybe over time, we'll be able to open retail stores, but we certainly have to do it in a way that Israelis like it, not the way that Starbucks likes it.
Unique question here, very industry-centric. This person asked, as a family-run restaurant equipment supplier to a hospitality industry, what niches do you see opening up, or do you see any radical cultural changes developing soon?
I'm not my area of expertise. I think healthful dining going to continue to grow. There's 3 or 4 players out there now that are growing pretty rapidly. And Sweet Greens is one of them, and there's a couple others. And I'm an investor in a vegetarian restaurant, and I think you're going to see more and more of that kind of thing. But they got to, it's about, I think, more about health. I think that, the restaurant business is a very creative business. You see, in Seattle, we've got, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of independent restaurateurs that open up very unique concepts with unique menu items and things like that. I think the guys that are going to get killed are the middle guys. It's the Red Robins. God, I can't even think of all the names of them. But the ones that are kind of these, they're middle of the road, restaurateurs that aren't that creative. They get in a niche and they don't change their menu. And those are the ones that are going to get hurt. But it's not really not my area of expertise. But I can tell you what I like. I like to go to the unique places. I like to find a great Middle Eastern place, the great Japanese places. And, I love barbecue. you know. So, you know, it's a unique bar. There's been lots of barbecue places that open up. Most all the chains have all failed, you know. And so I think you know, if you want to find something unique, I think the restaurant business can be unique if you have multiple concepts with different things, where you have a back of the house kind of is all the same, so to speak, you know, and all your, you know, your supply chain is all the same, but your menus are different, and it's very unique, and it feels like it's meant for you.
Interesting question here. How does Starbucks maintain its global supply of coffee? I mean, it's a massive, massive amount. How does it just make sure that the supply chain maintains itself?
Well, you know, we have a buying office in Switzerland, and we're all over the world. We have agronomy offices all over the world, so we're right in with the growers. Most of our coffee comes from small growers, 50 acres or less. It gets consolidated, you know, in those countries of origin. But that's a huge concern. Is you know, with global warming and things changing, what's going to happen to these high? We buy at a very unique level of coffee, at the highest possible level you can buy. Not necessarily the most expensive, but the highest level of quality you can buy. Strictly Arabica, hard bean coffee. We don't buy any Robusta. And that's a concern. Is there going to be a supply? And so it's in our interest to help growers grow and to help them. We have an office in Costa Rica. We have actually a little plant kind of in Costa Rica, and we work with the Costa Rican farmers, you know. But it's an issue, and that's, I know they're paying attention to it. It would have been right up on top of my list too, and I know it's on the top of their list. But you know, we're not by far any close to buying. You know, I don't know what percentage of the world's coffee supply is, but it is incredibly small. You'd think would be big, but it's not.
A great follow-up question here I just got in the chat. Yeah, I love the distinction you made between Sam's Club and Costco as a fair attitude towards compensation. What would you say to a person who argues that it is more profitable to compensate employees less? But more specifically, how do you convince someone that compensating employees as well as possible better benefits is actually better for the company's bottom line?
Well, you know, I don't think you do those things because it's going to be better for your bottom line. I think this is a values question. It's not an economic question. It's a values question. Who are you? How do you want to treat people? What do you stand for? I mean, you know, I know lots of people make the case, well, you know, it's, if you don't, you got to increase your bottom line all the time. And certainly Starbucks had to do that, but I don't think you need to do it on the backs of people. I think that's again, is another false equation. You can pay people well and still do well. You know, I mean, it gets proven time and time again. I can name you dozens of companies that all operate under the philosophy that I absolutely believe in, which is servant leadership, which is understanding that people are not there to serve you. You're there to serve them. You're there to serve your people in their journeys in life. And when you do that well and help them get what they want out of their lives, they're going to help you. And it is absolutely, that's a fact. That is just, that to me is hard science. That's how it works. If you care about your people, they're most likely going to care about you. If you don't care about them, trust me, they aren't going to work nearly as hard. I mean, fear only goes so far, you know, fear of being fired only goes so far, you know, but support and treating people with respect and dignity goes a long way. And I think it's more a question I would ask anybody in a business world, what are your values? Don't tell me people are your most important asset and then pay your people like they're not. You know, people are human beings, you know, and so you can't, you know, I'm not saying that everybody can pay somebody $50 an hour. You know, we couldn't do it at Starbucks, but within the realms of, we should be pushing the envelope on that. How much can we pay? What can we do more? You know, how do we make it work? I mean, at the end of the day, the customer's paying for it, you know, and so that means that we got to be really good at what we do, or the customer's not going to willing to pay for it.
Another good question over here. Whose idea was it to put the customer's name on the cup?
That started a guy. I'll tell you who started it. A guy named Stu Fields. He's long since retired from Starbucks, and his idea was, he said he was running the Midwest. He was in Chicago, and he said, I want all my stores to be like Cheers, where everybody knows your name. That's what started it. And he said, he said, I want each of my baristas to know at least 100 people by name and drink. That was a lot. And so you'd have a store that they would spread out the customers' names. And when they were there, they might know 800 or 900 customers by names and by drink. And he started it. And then over time, we got more sophisticated at it. And we said, we're going to start writing customers' names on the cup and calling the drink out, by the name. And that's, where it came from. One guy. Jewish
That's
guy.
amazing.
Yeah, great guy.
Let's see, we have a few more questions here. I want to try to get to as many as I can. 1 second. Oh, one question here is interesting. How do you feel about bringing more kosher products into Starbucks stores?
Well, that's a great question. There's a company in Southern California called Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and they pretty much do everything kosher. I think all their food is kosher. Our coffee is kosher. We paid to the rabbis like everybody else has to pay. That, you have to forgive me, all you Jews out there, but that's the biggest ripoff that there ever was. How could coffee not be kosher? But we have to pay for it. All right, fine, you pay, you put the money out, but that's a joke. Food, all right, stuff like that. I don't think that Starbucks could do that. Our base is too broad. So no Jews are going to want to come in and order a reduced fat turkey bacon sandwich. Maybe the turkey bacon they would, but we have sausage. It's not our business, and we can't fake that we are. If that matters to you, then there's lots of places that have kosher food and coffee you can go to. We're not going to be that company, and I would never advise it. Listen, we had long conversations about it, and Howard being Jewish, me being Jewish, and at the time we didn't have a kosher signal on our coffee, so we said we have to at least do that, and we did that.
I'm curious also, how do products within the Starbucks realm differ from region to region? Because many companies, right, you'll see different products in different spaces depending on what the demand is.
Yeah, well, the food is pretty much different not across the world, and we have different products in different places. If you went to Tokyo, you'd see bubble tea coffee, a little like with kind of like a tapioca in it. You'd see it's where caramel came from. We didn't have caramel in our stores in the US, but it started in Japan. And we have food is everywhere. Now, a latte is a latte is a latte. If you order a double tall latte in Seattle and you go to Tokyo, you're going to get the same double tall latte. We have a recipe. If you want it different, you can have it to whatever you want, but we start with our recipe first in terms of our beverages. We do have different beverages in lots of different places, though.
Here, I want to try to get to many questions we can. Some people argue that big companies like Starbucks compete and kind of crowd out small local mom and pop or individual companies. How do you respond to this? Do you think it's true? Do you disagree?
Baloney. Look at how many, for all of you from Seattle, how many different coffee companies there are in Seattle. When we started, there was only 2. Now there's hundreds. Right? And San Francisco, wherever you go, wherever Starbucks is, trust me, you're going to find other coffee companies that weren't in business 5 years ago. And they're all getting their piece. They get a good location, they have a unique niche, and they're making it happen. They're starting up all the time. There's plenty of room. It's like pizza. I've always wondered, how could there be so many different pizza places? Right? But every year in Seattle, there's a new pizza place opening up. Right? There seems to be an insatiable appetite for pizza and coffee. And if I were young and I wanted to do something today, I'd have no fear of Starbucks. I could open coffee stores and make a damn good living at it. And I know how I'd beat them, but I'm not going to tell you.
I think we'll just answer one last question for the evening. I'm curious, and there were a couple of questions about this. If you were a young man today, I'm not saying you're not a young man, you're certainly young at heart.
Thank you.
If you were my age, let's say I'm in my 20s, yeah. What would you say to an up-and-coming entrepreneur? What industry would you be investing in now, 30 years down the line, that will become the next Starbucks, you think?
Okay, I would worry less about that and more about figuring out who you are as a human being. I don't think it's about the idea. I think the first thing I'd do if I wanted to go start a business is I would spend about 3 months, not full-time, but deciding what my core values are, my 8 to 10 core values. What matters to me? And you can do that easily by going online. You'll find lists of 300-400 words that represent human values, because you need to know who you are before you can do something else. So I'd want to understand what my 8 to 10 core values are. That doesn't mean that there aren't 50 or 100 other values that could represent part of your life, but the ones that really matter to you. My first core value is honesty. Okay. And the honesty is just a word until you define it, until you say, this is what honesty means to me. And the first question I always ask people when they say I'm honest, I say, what would you tell a white lie about? And we all tell white lies. So define honesty or your core values for yourself. Write out sentences as it means. If honesty is my first core value, how does honesty come to life in my life? How do I make decisions and take actions based on honesty? So the second thing I do is figure out what my life is about. What's my mission in life? What am I trying to do here? Am I just trying to get rich? I mean, if that's what it is, be honest with yourself. And maybe your first core value should be greed. At least be honest, be authentic. And when you start a company, let everybody know we're here to make money. That's all we're here for, is to make money. Fine. That's your deal. That's your deal. That was not my deal. That was not Howard Schultz's deal. So decide who you are, what you stand for, and how those things are going to inform the actions and the decisions you make in your life. And then figure out in a paragraph how you're going to live your life. I have what I call my 6 Ps. I'll give them to you real quickly. The first P is purpose. Everything I do in my life has to have a purpose greater than myself. It can't be just about me. It's got to be about others. The second P is about passion. If I have a purpose greater than myself, then I damn well better be passionate about it. I better give it my energy and scream it from the highest mountaintops. The third P is persistence. Anything worth accomplishing in life takes persistence. There are rocks in the river no matter what you're going to do in your life. And you won't know where they are, and you're going to hit them. And you're going to have to figure out how to get over them, around them, under them, or through them, or whatever. And that persistence, makes a difference, and persistence pays. The fourth P is patience. Now, you'd think patience and persistence are the opposite of each other. They're not. You have to have patience. Not everything comes in the time frame you're going to come. Starbucks, everybody looks at Starbucks now and say, God, look at that overnight success. We weren't. We were losing money when I got there, significant amounts. We weren't going to get any more money. We couldn't get any money from venture capital firms if we didn't figure out how to make the company profitable. So I had to have patience. I had to figure out the journey. How were we going to make it work? And the most important person you have to have patience with is yourself. You got to be patient with yourself, because it just doesn't always come in the time frame that you want. And then the fifth P is performance. The facts are performance matters. It matters in all parts of our lives. If you have a significant other in your life, if you're married and monogamy is what you've agreed to in your life, then you need to stay monogamous. So performance matters. That's performance. If your job in the house is to take out the garbage, and you shouldn't have to be asked twice, even though I get asked a lot. Performance matters. And so performance matters in our personal lives, in our marriages, with our kids. If you said, I'm going to show up at a soccer game, you damn well better show up at the soccer game for your kid, or tell them why you can't be there, and don't do it again. And it's the same way in life or in business. If you commit to your boss, or you commit to your lenders, you're going to perform, then you got to perform, because at the end of the day, performance matters. It's the only thing that keeps you going. You don't get to borrow any more money if you don't perform. You don't keep your marriage intact if you don't perform, and your kids won't respect you if you don't perform. So performance matters. And then the most important P, single most important P, is that everything is about people. Everything is about serving another human being. There is no job that we will ever have in our lives. I don't care what you do, doctor, lawyer, jeweler, baker, coffee maker, architect, whatever it happens to be. There's only one reason any of us are put on this earth, and that's to serve other human beings. And we do that well. When we do that well, okay, we will get what we need out of life. Not always what we want, but we'll always get what we need. So that's where I would go first. I would worry less about the business and worry more about who you are.
Wow, I think that's such a great way to end off with our program. And as a reminder, Howard has written a book about all these wonderful different things, so you should definitely check that out. 2 books, excuse me. But I want to take a moment and thank Howard so much for taking the time out for speaking with all of us this evening, and thank you all for joining us as well. Just as a reminder, this is through our Sephardic Digital Academy. It is a nonprofit initiative. We're actually in the end of the year campaign. If you can give, if you're able to support us to make sure we continue our nonprofit mission, we greatly appreciate it. I put the donation link in the chat, but otherwise you're always welcome to check out all wonderful programs and check us out online at SephardicBrothers.com. And all our videos are also recorded on Facebook. So if you missed any part of this, you can certainly check it out on our Facebook page. With that, everyone have a wonderful evening. And Howard, again, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. And Noche buena, everyone.